So like Pete said, I'm from a company called Flexport. We help businesses ship product. We're a modern freight forwarder. I wanted to spend today and kind of in lieu of what we did yesterday, kind of share a couple different anecdotes, some horror stories, some best practices, and just kind of walk through things that could go wrong and things that you guys can do to prevent it. So my background, I went to the University of Michigan from undergrad, born and raised in the States, spent a little time on Wall Street doing investment banking, and then after that spent some time working with early stage startups and tech companies, investing through VC, and more recently has been at Flexport as the first full-time employee there, a little over 2.5 years, helping businesses ship product. Cool. So quick agenda for today. Wanted to go at a high level, what is freight forwarding? Why should you guys care? Some horror stories, followed by best practices subsequently, and then a little bit on Amazon FBA. I think yesterday a lot of the presenters and speakers already had talked through Amazon FBA to death, so I won't go into that much detail, but hopefully it'll still be somewhat helpful. So like Sam mentioned, there's a couple different types of shipping. How can you actually move your stuff from your factory to your final warehouse, whether that's your own fulfillment center or Amazon FBA? I like to think of it in a really simple rule of thumb. If it's less than 100 kilograms, you probably want to ship it via express service like a FedEx, DHL, UPS. If it's over 100 kilograms, and again, my rule of thumb, if it's over 100 kilograms, I highly recommend looking into a freight forwarder. It just does not make sense to use FedEx if it's 500 kilograms or 1,000. You can typically get a huge discount by using a freight forwarder. Again, I think everyone here knows what freight forwarding is, but at a very dictionary level, you're coordinating shipments from one place to another forwarded through various methods of transportation. So that means a freight forwarder is responsible for coordinating things from your cargo from the factory via truck to the airport, and then from the airport via plane to the next airport, and then another truck to your final destination. So they're forwarding it through multiple different methods. And then again, for the different shipping methods, you can kind of think about it in a couple different tiers. For air freight, typically freight forwarders will think about it in terms of 100 kilogram, 300 kilogram, 500 kilogram, 1,000 kilogram weight breaks. And then for those different tiers, you'll have different prices. For ocean freight, it's a little bit more clean cut. You have FCL, which stands for full container load, and that comes in 20-foot containers, 40-foot containers, and 40-foot high cube containers. There's a couple other different container sizes, but these are some of the more common ones. And then you have what's called LCL, or less than container load, which basically means you're buying space in a container that might have other people's stuff on it too. Again, kind of beating the horse here. Air freight, faster, more expensive, potentially less examinations. Ocean freight, a lot slower, but also very, very cheap. Like Sam mentioned, the goal for every business should be, I want to move all my stuff via ocean freight. There's no reason that you should ship it via air freight unless you have very, very lightweight product and you can move a lot of them very quickly. Ocean freight, if you have a sustainable supply chain and predictable lead times, it just makes a lot more sense. Your per unit cost is going to be significantly cheaper if you're able to move it via ocean freight. For ocean freight, the examination rate's a lot higher than air freight, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, especially if you're shipping LCL. Cool. Horror story number 1. I've kind of put up 3 terms here, but I'll kind of just walk through some anecdotes here. One of our earlier clients here at Flexport, we originally focused our business on customs clearance into the US. We wanted to solve that pain point because it was a pain in the ass to clear goods through customs. I don't know how many of you guys have interacted with customs, stopped by the airport, stopped by the ocean port, but they are not easy to deal with. Very offline, not a lot of wiggle room. And so, very early on, what we had done is, we wanted to help clients clear shipments through customs. That was our business model. And because of the way that we kind of started our business, we typically found clients right when they found out, hey, I need a customs broker, and not before. What that meant was they probably received an email from their freight forwarder or from someone else that said, hey, I'm sending you what's called an original bill of lading. You need to sign this and then give it to your trucker that's going to pick up the goods from the ocean port so that you can get your stuff. Let me say that one more time. 2016, original bill of lading is probably the most common way of providing a bill of lading to the consignee or the importer around the world. What happens is they actually FedEx that piece of document to you, and you have to sign it on the back, and then you need to go to the port with that document to get your goods. 2016. That's what's going on right now. So one of our earlier shipments, they had no idea what an original bill of lading was. They received the document via FedEx. They shipped it over to us and then said, hey, by the way, I had no idea that I needed to do customs clearance. I heard you're a broker, help me out. Cool. We got the bill of lading, more than happy to help them out. And then they realized that, oh crap, I got this other thing called a arrival notice, and it says my last free day is yesterday. For the people that are laughing, you probably know what that means. It means you're going to face something called demurrage. It's this really fancy old English term for you're going to get screwed by storage fees. And again, Murphy's Law, things always, when bad things happen, they tend to happen all at the same time. So for this client, they had no idea that they needed a customs broker. They just got this original bill of lading. They had no idea what they're supposed to do with it. They signed it, sent it over to us. They now need to start paying demurrage and storage. And we found out that they don't know what their HTS code is. They don't have any of their shipment documents, and we have to play catch up between their freight forwarder, the CFS, the container freight station, to get them their goods. You don't want to be that client. You don't want to be that importer that doesn't realize how to get their ducks in a row. So best practice here for this particular horror story. Typically, depending on the terms you have with your supplier or your factory, they'll give you the option of how do you want to release the shipment, how do you want to do your bill of lading. You have the option for doing an original or OBL bill of lading or a telex release. Typically, once you've made good on your payment or if you have a really good relationship with your supplier, they're more than happy to telex release the shipment or telex release the bill of lading. What that basically means is they have endorsed the bill of lading and said that, yes, the shipment is released. You are able to go pick up the goods from the port once it's ready. This does not require them to FedEx any documents to you. It's done electronically. An email that says this is telex released or a telex stamp on the bill of lading document would be appropriate. That's all you really need, and you're free and clear to go pick up the goods. Additionally, I think Sam was mentioning this earlier, and I think the panel had also talked about it earlier with Mike. Know your HTS codes. This is super important. Typically, a lot of importers, they don't realize that there's this thing called an HTS code or HS code, which helps classify what the product is when it gets imported into a new country. It determines what the duty rate's going to be and if there's any additional things that need to be processed for that particular product. Ask your supplier what the HTS code is. Ask your customs broker to kind of double check. And additionally, whenever you're shipping product, make sure that you're able to keep an aggregate of all the different shipment documents associated with that shipment. It's just good practice for auditing purposes, but also when you're actually clearing goods, if you actually need to bring in another party to help out or assist or just give you some advice, having them all in one place makes it a lot easier for someone to come in and help. Horror story number 2. Like I mentioned, Flexport, we originally started out as a customs brokerage. We got into the freight forwarding game in summer of 2014. And this horror story was our first freight forwarding client. They had just made this brand new STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics toys for girls. Awesome product, fantastic. But it came riddled with a ton of problems. I'll go clockwise from the top left. So export license. I think this was touched on yesterday and touched on again a little today, but factories, they typically have export licenses that allow them to export products that they manufacture out from China. Very simple, but that also means that if you go to a factory and they're like a known plastics or silicon manufacturer or whatever else, they probably have a license to export plastics, silicon, whatever else. If you ask them to make a new widget for you, that's fantastic. They're more than happy to do that. But chances are, unless you're working with a trading company, that manufacturer, that factory probably doesn't have an export license to ship this new toy, this new widget that they just made for you. So you're stuck in a debacle where, crap, they now need to either buy an export license or have to work with someone to get an export license for you to actually ship it from the country. Not a great first experience when you just spent $40,000 on tooling and you want to actually ship the new products to the US. That was problem one. So as we were trying to ship it from the country, found out they didn't have an export license, spent another 2 weeks figuring out, all right, how do they actually get the arrangement to get that set up? Cool. New toy. It's an STEM toy. It has lithium-ion batteries inside the product, as well as magnets. And they needed to ship this via air freight because they're already 3 months behind. When you're shipping lithium-ion batteries, even if it's a very, very small battery, you need to have an MSDS, a material safety data sheet, before it can actually go on planes. And not all airlines will accept lithium-ion batteries. Even right now, most airline carriers are super stringent on the types of batteries that they accept. Most airlines won't even accept lithium-ion batteries anymore. Magnets, you need a magnet testing inspection report for most airlines to actually accept your product if it contains magnets. The reason being, even though it's a very, very small product and the magnetic field is very small, if you put a bunch of these products together on a pallet and a box, it could cause a Gauss field that could mess up some of the radars on the plane. Cool. The fourth thing, CPSC. I think it stands for Consumer Product Safety Commission. So you're making toys for kids. You need to get it tested. Same thing with FCC, FDA. You need to get it tested, registered. CPSC, these guys had no idea that they needed to get things tested, and so another 2-3 weeks before they got their certification, before they got all the documents, before it could fly. And so we were planning to ship it out in June. Didn't leave Shenzhen until July. There's a lot more to this story, but the kicker is, cool. We got past parts 1, export license, batteries, lithium-ion batteries, magnets. Fantastic. It lands in the US. This is their very first shipment. They're super stoked. It arrived on time. Oh shit. Customs says there's an examination hold. Why? What does that mean? Well, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, but typically for your very first couple shipments, US Customs is going to be a pain in the butt. And the probability, the likelihood of your shipment being pulled for examination is much higher than any subsequent shipment that you do for the same product. For these guys, it was the first time that they've shipped product. And as a kicker, it has lithium-ion batteries. It has magnets. It needs CPSC. So a lot of things that added flags to their probability of getting examined. Different examinations will take different amounts of time. If you have different regulatory bodies like the FDA, FCC, they're a completely separate entity from US Customs, and so they'll take their own separate time to test your product. CPSC in this case, they're actually allowed to say, I'm going to hold your stuff for a month before I tell you what I'm going to do with it. So our client was freaking out. Again, they were 3 months behind, now 4 months. The product arrived, and they told all their backers that it arrived. But CPSC wouldn't let them pick up the cargo. And they wouldn't give them any indication, no timeline, nothing else. And it was just very tiresome. Not only that, because of the CPSC hold, they had to pay additional storage charges. Because again, Customs and CPSC is not the same entity, so they don't care that you got a release from another entity. Fortunately, our head of customs brokerage at Flexport is also the chairman of the board of the Northern California Freight Forwarders and Customs Broker Association, so he was able to put in a couple calls and get it expedited. So instead of 4 weeks, we got it out in 3 weeks, and the client was very happy with our ability to assist them. But man, everything that could go wrong went wrong. And it's not like one of these out of the blue things that could potentially happen to you. It will happen to you. Whether it's a trifecta or a quadfecta here, it will happen to you at some point. So what can you do to kind of alleviate some of these concerns? And I apologize for beating a dead horse, but supplier diligence. ask them if they have the export license for whatever product you're trying to get them to make for you or ship. Make sure that they can tell you what the HS code is. If they can't, again, it's kind of a red flag. Like, why don't they know what the product they're selling you or making you should be classified as? They should know what that is. At the end of the day, they don't care whether you have the right information or not, because as the importer of record, it really is your fault if you claim the wrong HS code. If you don't file the appropriate documentation, it's on you, not them. So they're not super incentivized to help you if they don't think it's a long-term partnership. Now, regulatory diligence. If you have a new product that you're making, make sure that you have the FCC, FDA, CPSC testing, registration documents all in order before you actually ship your product. And I think Sam was going to mention this, but his time got cut out short. But it's helpful to do a pilot shipment. The reason for this horror story number 2, having a trifecta is very rare. You might encounter issues where you get a hassle for shipping lithium-ion batteries or a custom examination, but having all of these things hit at once, it only happens on your first couple shipments. And so what I mean by doing a pilot shipment here is do a small shipment. Instead of trying to ship your entire batch of a completely new product that the US Customs has never seen before, ship like 10 units via air freight. Don't use express service, because express service, they have what's called a manifest clearance that allows them to fly underneath the customs radar, more or less, and customs will never kind of understand that you, as an importer of record, are shipping this new product. Instead, I would recommend shipping a very small quantity, maybe 10, 100 units, whatever it is that you're moving, using a freight forwarder and just training US Customs to recognize your name as the importer of record, training them to recognize that this is a new product with this HS code. And so if you have a lot riding on this, you're able to allocate your time a little bit more effectively. So again, get units off the first production run, do a quick test shipment, and just run it through US Customs. If you would rather have a small shipment get held in customs rather than your entire life savings, it's just really, really, really good advice. This helped for a lot of other Kickstarter companies and other companies that we've worked with that have new products as well. Horror story number 3. I think this, the Giphy on the left-hand side here, or right-hand side, kind of circulated a couple years ago, but it's basically a guy at the airline terminal putting cartons onto, or loading cartons onto the plane. This won't necessarily happen with your boxes, but it could. It absolutely could. So horror story number 3. And this is no specific client because this happens a lot from Flexport's side, but typically what we see is a lot of clients or a lot of importers, they'll have an incomplete freight quote. Maybe their factory provided them a freight quote that said, hey, this is the price to get everything all in door to door from my factory to your warehouse, but they left out a couple different things. They didn't give any expectation that there could be any customs examinations or what that might cost. And they didn't really provide any coverage in terms of what happens if it gets damaged. It happens way too often, and there's a lot of different things that you can do to kind of protect yourself from incomplete freight quotes, from customs examinations, and damages. I don't know how well you guys can see this. I'll share the presentation afterwards so you guys can get a pretty good screenshot. But on the left-hand side, I have an example of an ocean freight quote, and on the right-hand side, I have an example of an air freight quote with all the different lines broken out, how it's being charged, and what's the summation of all the different parts. Point here being, and we have a lot of these resources online at Flexport's resources page, so you guys can kind of take a look there. But the point being, you should understand what line items you're expecting for a particular freight shipment, for a freight quote. You should never let a freight forwarder give you an email that says, you should just pay $4,000 for this shipment. Don't worry, it's all included. You should ask them always to break out every single line item and make sure that you're completely covered and satisfactorily covered. Additionally, insurance is so freaking cheap. The value of your products is so high, or could potentially be so high. Freight insurance is, I think, someone mentioned yesterday, like 0.5% of the total value of the products. It's a no-brainer. Get freight insurance. It'll protect you from any damages that gets incurred once you assume responsibility of your cargo. Additionally, time management. Chinese New Year happens every year. Chinese National Day happens in October, and again, most of China takes about a week off for that. Chinese New Year happens around February, another week off for that. And in addition to the week that they're taking off, that means a lot of people are traveling, going on holiday, but also means that you can probably estimate another 7 to 14 days before the factory's production is back to normal ramp. Now, I mentioned earlier that I want to talk a little bit about the different types of examinations, and just for your reference, there's two primary types of U.S. Customs examinations. One is called a non-intrusive examination, or an X-ray exam. That typically will add 3 to 5 days to your total lead time before you can receive it at FBA or your warehouse. And the other type is called an intensive examination. This could take up to 5 or more days before it gets complete. And the difference is, for most ocean containers, it's very easy for the ocean port to run an X-ray by the container, and the entire container is X-rayed, done fairly frequently. So that's not so much of a big deal, but it does add a couple days to your total transit time. For intensive examinations, what typically happens is U.S. Customs decides, hey, for some reason, the importer security filing or the customs entry that your broker, your freight forwarder submitted on your behalf raised some sort of flag. Maybe the HS code is weird. Maybe it was your first time importing. But an intensive customs examination means that they'll actually open up your cartons and examine your product. They want to make sure that there's no counterfeits, no brands, that it's exactly what it's supposed to be. Your products could get damaged, or they could take some of your units for testing. It's kind of a pain in the ass, and guess what? For these examinations that Customs is doing for you on your behalf, they will charge you money for it. Seems counterintuitive, but you're actually paying Customs for the glad delight of adding days to your transit time. It's not great. Additionally, I always tell this to new importers: don't underestimate the power of really good packaging. Getting double thickness cardboard boxing can go a long way, especially in a typical 3 meter drop or 1 meter drop test. Just save yourself a headache. Yeah, it'll increase your weight just a little bit, but it's marginal. And if your product is pretty sensitive, it'll definitely go a long way in protecting it. And then I don't know if you guys can see the image too well on the right-hand side here, but shrink wrap your pallets. For most shipments that are going to FBA, they require your shipment to be palletized anyway. If you use black shrink wrap, it's actually a pretty good security blanket to make sure that people don't actually see what you're shipping. So for example, very sensitive products like drones or Apple phones or whatever else, having black shrink wrap makes it so that thieves and people with very sticky fingers at the airlines, airports, ocean ports don't try to steal a couple units or a couple boxes. Same price as a transparent shrink wrap, so you're not really paying extra for that. So, common mistakes. Earlier, we mentioned a bunch of different common mistakes. Some of the other ones that I didn't really mention or touch too long on, U.S. Customs bond. If you're shipping into the U.S. And you are the importer of record, you need what's called a U.S. Customs bond. It's a one-time annual fee, and it is just kind of a liability, or not a liability. It's like security for the U.S. government to make sure they actually pay your duties. The importer security filing is a filing that all ocean shipments must file 24 hours prior to the departure from the country of origin. Most freight quotes won't include the customs duties because they don't know what the duties are going to be when they first ship. So make sure that you allocate that into whatever you're expecting to spend to ship the product. And again, value-added taxes, VATs, GSTs, HSTs. These things will kind of add new costs to the cost of shipping your product that you probably didn't allocate originally. Best practices. Again, a nice laundry list on the left-hand side that we already mentioned, but on the right-hand side, a couple neat little tricks. If you are shipping a completely new product that you had a factory make for you on your behalf, you can do what's called an HTS customs binding ruling. Talk to your freight forwarder, talk to your customs broker, and ask them if they could do a binding ruling for your product. What that means is they file a petition with US Customs that says, hey, for this new product that we just built, I want you to use this HS code because nothing else matches. The benefit here is Customs will be trained to recognize that this product for you has this HS code and correspondingly has this duty rate. That way you can kind of accurately predict this is the price of the customs duty that I'm going to pay every single time so that there isn't any gray area. Additionally, if you're shipping to other warehouses outside of Amazon FBA, making delivery appointments is very helpful, but also an advanced shipment notice, very helpful for most warehouses to kind of allocate labor. Cool. Amazon FBA, fantastic service. Can't say enough about it. Makes it so that it levels the playing field so that everyone here is able to get that 7-digit Amazon seller account. A couple things to just note, and again, not going to talk too much here, but prior to delivery, all of your packages need to be pre-sorted and pre-labeled. And if you're palletizing the goods, which again, FBA typically requires, you need to have a label on the north, south, east, and west side of the pallet for Amazon to actually accept that pallet. Like Sam mentioned, it's a lot cheaper to get this done in China than it is to get it done by some FBA inspection in the US. So highly recommend asking a freight forwarder or whoever else to kind of get that set up for you in China. Now, how do you actually get it to FBA's warehouse? Depending on your contract, you could either say you want to coordinate the delivery yourself, which gives you the possibility to kind of deconsolidate or send to different Amazon warehouses if need be, or option 2, which I kind of recommend, is Amazon's choice. They can use Amazon SPD or their partner carrier network to pick up the cargo from whatever temporary warehouse or location that you're currently using. They have highly discounted rates for trucking, so it's a pretty good option. Amazon has also mentioned that if the cargo is less than 150 pounds, they typically prefer to just use master cartons instead of palletizing it and applying a UPS label so that they can just pick it up and go. By our count in the fall of 2015, I think there's about 94 different FBA centers in the US. They don't actually publish this information. It's kind of a black box in some instances. But Amazon is getting more and more autonomous, and with that, somewhat difficult to deal with for freight forwarders like Flexport, because not all truckers, not all freight forwarders can actually deliver into an Amazon FBA center. Some Amazon FBA centers require you to be one of their selected partners, otherwise they won't actually allow you to make the appointment. Something to know. Cool, so not really trying to sell Flexport too hard here, but we're a modern freight forwarder. We provide importers a modern web app and a dashboard for them to manage their shipments, to track their shipments, to get analytics behind their shipments. Our goal is that you shouldn't have to worry about logistics. You shouldn't have to worry about supply chain. You should be worried about growing your business, selling your product. Let us worry about supply chain, logistics, and shipping. There's a lot of resources that we've published over the past couple of years on flexport.com/learn. For example, a guide on sending products to Amazon fulfillment. We have a bunch of different resources on Incoterms and other things that would be super helpful if you're a first-time importer, and a couple neat tricks for more veterans as well. Additionally, our blog has a lot of more recent news. So for example, ocean freight prices right now are at an all-time low. You can ship a container from here to Europe for less than a fancy dinner. I think like a $200 dinner and a $200 steak dinner is probably more expensive than it would cost to ship a 20-foot container from Shenzhen to London, I think. Freight prices are very cheap. Take advantage of that. Cool, and that's all I got. I'm more than happy to answer any questions you guys have.
Great, we've got a few minutes for questions. You can ask questions to either Anthony or Sam. How you doing? So actually, I just signed up with Flexport, and we've got our first shipment that's being picked up next week, and a second one coming. So looking forward to working with you guys. One of the challenges we're facing is because we do a lot of oversized stuff. So we don't want to do the inventory placement because it's $1.30 per item with Amazon plus like 20 cents or 30 cents for each pound over 5 pounds. So we're kind of stuck in this, having to use your warehouse in the middle and then, deconsolidate and everything. So you mentioned doing palletization on the China side, but then obviously you get less in a container as well. So we're probably gonna just ship everything to you and then have you palletize there and ship it in. But is there any strategies that kind of end to end work best in terms of large items going all the way? Is it better to organize, with Flexport, door to door versus having it picked up with Amazon preferred carrier LTL, or is it like better if the supplier does FOB and you take it from there, or use you guys door to door, or even pick it up at the supplier? Like, what's the best way to do full containers end to end?
Good question. It's one of those questions where I have to kind of say it depends. What's the best way to handle that? The less number of players you have involved in your supply chain, the better. It reduces complications, errors with coordination. I would recommend if you have these oversized items and you're not entirely sure when the inventory will go out, having Flexport pick it up door to door and having like our temporary warehouse kind of cross dock and deconsolidate for you is probably the easiest way for you to handle that. Now, if you know what inventory needs to go to what Amazon location, then having it pre-palletized and sorted at origin or in China, and then having it arrive and be picked up by Amazon is also preferable. I don't think these are necessarily mutually exclusive, the difference being whether Flexport does the delivery or Amazon does the pickup and delivery. We're happy to do it either way.
Okay. And do you charge less to deconsolidate if the packages come in a container and you have to unload the container? I think it was like a $300 charge if it was cartons. Is it less if it's palletized?
Yep.
Or is there anything we can do to decrease our additional time and cost at your warehouse?
Yep. So if the goods are palletized, it's a lot cheaper to deconsolidate it. Just for the mere fact that if you're moving loose cartons or loose boxes, you have to one box at a time. Whereas if you have a pallet, you get a forklift in there and you do it like 5-10 times, you're done.
Thank you.
Sure.
Is there a minimum volume that we have to meet to sign up with Flexport?
Yeah, so our unofficial minimum is at least 1 shipment per month. We had to add that restriction in recently just because the number of signups was getting astronomical and our team size still needs to grow to accommodate the volume. We found that a lot of people that only wants to ship like once a year, the setup time and the setup cost was just a little too high for us to maintain and manage. We want to make sure that we really understand your supply chain, your product, and give you all the attention and care that you need. And we just had to kind of draw a line in the ground for who can we get through the system first versus putting on the wait list. And our minimum right now is at least 1 shipment per month.
Is there a minimum volume on that one shipment, or?
It's more about consistency rather than the size. So if it's 100 kilogram shipment every month, that's probably okay, as long as it's consistent, recurring. If it's like, again, 100 kilograms per year, like it's hard for us to do that.
Are there plans for growth to take on smaller players, or is it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So at the end of the day, we are a technology company. We just happen to do freight forwarding. We do that fairly well. And we do that fairly well because of the technology that we have. We hire some of the best software engineers in the world. They've come in from Amazon, Facebook, Google, wherever. And the name of the game here is to get them to help us automate more and more of the process such that smaller importers, people that are just starting out, are able to get a lot of the attention and care that they need from our team, from our software very quickly. Right now, that's still kind of a mix between human and tech. And so with more and more engineering, we'll be able to apply the tools that we've built to both clients, importers, as well as our team to give you guys the attention you need.
Last question.
Sure.
Does it matter about, like, if the shipment, for example, let's say we start off with one that's fairly large and then it doesn't sell and it decreases in volume, would that cause you guys to maybe lose us as a client or that sort of thing? Or is it, once we're in your brand space, we're basically there?
So let me kind of rephrase the question. Is the question, you did a very large order and then suddenly you just drop off and nothing, you don't ship it?
Correct, yeah. Like if it doesn't move, the product doesn't move, and we're sort of stuck and, you know, our anticipated numbers just aren't met, would we be dropped as a client?
Flexport doesn't drop clients. So if you get through the door, we never drop clients. And again, that's part of why we had to add that restriction in, was we want to make sure that we give the right attention and care that every single client that walks through our door gets.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure.
Hi. I've never done this, but I know quite a few of my friends who have done this. Their supplier keeps asking them if they want to write a lower value on the invoice, on the shipping invoice. So I've got that question a few times.
Sure.
What's your take on that?
Don't tell me about it. Definitely don't write in an email. As a customs broker, my legal answer is always no. Don't ever do that. Yeah, just don't do it. You know what you paid for it. At the end of the day, if you can be audited and they found out you paid $10 per unit versus the $1 that you wrote down on that piece of paper, you could get a lot of trouble. Your ability to import could get revoked. You could get penalized. A lot of things could happen, and it's, you know, the average, I think the duty rate into the US is like 5.3% into the US. It's not astronomical. It's nothing. And you're already paying on the commercial invoice value and not the retail value that you're selling at. It's really not worth it. It's a nice thing that, you know, these suppliers, these factories are trying to do for you because they're trying to reduce your costs, but, you know, it doesn't really benefit you at the end of the day whether you're paying the $50 versus $75 for the product duties. Additionally, if you're moving mass amounts of product, customs will realize that, hey, you can't actually buy this thing for $1. They're not that silly. So I definitely wouldn't try to undermark the value of your goods.
Okay, thank you. And the short second question, I heard a lot of people talking about air freight and air cargo. Can you tell us a few differences between these two?
I think you mean air freight and express.
No, I've heard about Air Express being the most expensive one, air freight, and then air cargo. So the second and the third are basically the same thing?
Freight and cargo is same thing, to my understanding.
Okay.
The difference between express air freight and cargo or freight, you know, one has a much higher cost and one has a much lower cost.
Okay, thank you.
All right, hey, great. Big hand of applause for Anthony. And by the way, we were recording it, so I appreciate your legal answer.